Welcome back to the American Experiment Podcast. Catherine, what do we have on the docket today?
Well, first we're talking about Keith Ellison. He returned some donations from fraudsters and their friends. Then a legislative update. Did you know they've only passed 3 bills so far this session? Then finally, we're looking at the No Kings protesters and watching all the cringe back. On the back half, we're talking to Senator Tim Sheehy, who gives us a great insight into all of the crazy stuff going on right now at our nation's capital.
Let's dive in. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. Things are crazy here in Minnesota, and we try to give you a more sane perspective and take on things. I'm Grace Keating, of course, here with Catherine Johnson.
Well, what did you do this weekend, Grace? Did you attend any of the protests?
No, I'm really thrilled to say that the No Kings protests did not impact my life in any way.
No,
I didn't see any signs. I didn't see
Hmm.
any overpass protests, any bridge protests. Normally I see those driving around. I guess they were all kind of gathered into one central location that I didn't go by, and so my weekend was uninterrupted.
Yeah, thank you for that, I guess, by the way, to the protesters. They closed some streets downtown and by St. Paul, like things that affected no one because no one goes there anyway unless they're protesting. So thank you to that. I mean, I think I spent a lot of time this weekend with my family, and I think that is one thing we see. This is kind of a theory I have about like why we see all of these, especially boomers out protesting on the left. It's like, why aren't you home with your families? Why aren't you hanging out with your grandchildren? I think they've been saddled with these millennial children who don't want to have kids because they're afraid of like climate change or whatever. And now these poor boomers have no grandkids because my grandparents spent all weekend celebrating our grandkids and their grandkids, my nieces and nephews' birthdays. And it was just so joyful. And then I turned on, Twitter, and I was like, oh my gosh, there are some really sad people out there. And so I wish all of those people the absolute best. And I also encourage millennials to have some freaking kids so that your grandparents have things to do on the weekend and don't have to march out in the streets in weird blow-up frog costumes.
Yeah, I have an adjacent theory, which we can get into later. But after watching the footage from the protest this weekend, the No Kings rally, I get the sense that a lot of these people are, like you said, I mean, boomers, people who lived through Woodstock and maybe the Summer of Love and
Total hippie
MLK.
element.
Yeah, and they kind of want to relive the glory days. And of course, you've got this media that is fanning the flames of any liberals' concerns about the federal government's actions and ICE and Trump, and so they see a chance to jump on this trend of fear, really, and get back into the protest mindset of that they had in their 20s. So that's my theory, is that they're reliving the glory days.
That's true. I think there's a sense of like belonging that comes with it too, when they're like feel like they're part of a group, but they're fighting something, even if the group like doesn't make any sense and what they're fighting for isn't real and doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter. It's the fact that they're like they have something to attach themselves to. I don't know. I feel like we're on something.
We will get into some of those clips from the rally later on in this episode. But first, there were some really interesting developments in the Keith Ellison saga that's unfolding here in Minnesota. That's, of course, our state attorney general. Just in the last not in the last few days, it's been uncovered in the last few days that he's returned some, I think it's $12,500 in campaign donations made by 5 men who were associated with the infamous, of course, Feeding Our Future fraud scandal. Now, these donations are reflected in a report filed with the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board by his campaign treasurer early last month for the period of calendar year 2025. And this is so important for a few reasons. Of course, Keith Ellison was at the Capitol just a few weeks ago testifying before Congress on the subject of his knowledge of what was happening with the Feeding Our Future fraud scandal. And one of the issues that came up was some of these campaign donations that he's now returned.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's interesting. It's a little confusing because, some of the donations are people that were in that meeting, but there was a number of donations that were made just 9 days after that infamous meeting where he told people associated with Feeding Our Future that he would help them, quote, go fight these people, meaning fight for them because they thought they were being cut off from funding because of racism. And so he pledged their support. 9 days later, he did get a number of donations. And so the whole thing is like just very sketchy. And Keith Ellison has completely tried to deny everything. But here it is right here that he has returned now $12,500 of campaign donations. So it begs the question, well, why and when did you know what you know?
Yeah, exactly. You've got Gandhi Yusuf Muhammad, who made a, again, now returned $2,500 donation on December 20th, 2021. That's just over a week after Ellison met in person with Gandhi's sister. See, again, it's all these weird family and friend connections. He met with his sister, Ikram Yusuf Mohammed, and other figures linked to the free food fraud scandal. Ellison returned that donation in May 2025, a little more than a month after an audio recording of that December 2021 meeting was made public by us and Bill Glenn here at Center of the American Experiment. Ikram Mohammed was reportedly the individual who made the December 2021 recording that we released. She was charged in the case in January 2024 as the 63rd defendant. Ikram pled guilty last week in the fraud and faces up to 10 years in federal prison for masterminding a $15 million free food fraud.
That's so crazy.
It's insane.
$15 million.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I think sometimes you hear the 250 million number, at least for me, and I'm like, oh, there's so many people involved in that. And while there is also massive amounts of money, which makes it all the crazier that they weren't able to catch these people for so long when it was like 15 million.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It is insane to think too how long these cases take to fully develop. Because here we're sitting in, April of 2020, almost April of 2026. And we're talking about a woman who was doing this in December 2021. She was charged in 2024. These cases take so long. And I hear frequently from people who say, why isn't so-and-so behind bars? Why isn't this happening? Why isn't this happening? These cases take a really long time to build and uncover, and it takes a long time to get people to face justice.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the sad truth about our system.
Moving through, Gandhi was charged in the same federal indictment as Ikram, along with 5 other defendants, all of whom have or will, says Bill Glenn at AmericanExperiment.org, plead guilty in the case. Gandhi alone remains to face a jury trial scheduled to begin next month at the federal courthouse in downtown Minneapolis. Now, the other 3 donations that we're talking about here were also accepted by Ellison on December 20th, 2021, but they were not returned. This is the key part. They were not returned until December 31st, 2025, just a few months ago, which was the last possible day eligible for inclusion in the reporting period. Each man had also given $2,500 in 2021, which, listen closely here, is the maximum allowed contribution for an attorney general candidate. So it kind of sounds like small potatoes here. These are really small dollar amounts in the grand scheme of things, but it's the maximum allowed amount for this specific candidate position.
Yeah, and that money is really valuable. If you know anything about campaign finance, the money in your campaign account is worth more in a lot of ways than money from a PAC or a third party, because you can spend it. It goes farther with things like television advertisements, for example. They'll charge you lower rates. So it's interesting, and it might seem small, but it's really the max out amount. They maxed out to Keith Ellison. That's a valuable donation.
Worth noting, too, that none of those 3 have been accused of any wrongdoing, but they're all in this circle. That's what's so interesting. It's all these people who are connected to each other, who know each other, their relatives, their friends. They're all in this circle that these fraudsters were operating in. So fast forward to February 12th. That's about a month and a half after these donations were returned. Keith Ellison was called to testify before the Senate's Homeland Security Committee. So as we said during the meeting, he was asked about these donations, these $12,500, by Senator Josh Hawley. Let's play the tape of that hearing just to remind us all of how everything went down.
Why'd you take their money? Why'd you take their money?
I didn't.
You took $10,000.
No, that's a false statement.
$10,000 9 days after the meeting.
False statement.
You took $10,000. Here's what happened. They went to your office.
They
solicited money from you. They solicited help from you.
That's also wrong.
They came to your office. It was your official office. You met with them for 54 minutes.
No, they didn't.
They asked you for help. You pledged it to them, and they talked repeatedly about money. In fact, it's all they talked about.
That's a lie.
Money, 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 money. They said, we will put our dollars in the right place. We will support candidates that will fight to protect our interests. You replied, that's right. They said, if you are securing your donor base and securing your power base, you can act the way you want. You replied, money is freedom. They said the amount of money circulating, I'm reading the transcript, the amount of money circulating in our community today is powerful, and we haven't realizing it in a meaningful way. And you said, give me the specifics. And 9 days later, you took $10,000 from people who were then indicted. It's in your reports. Why'd you do it?
Sir,
was it worth it?
You know what? This is a
I think we can stop the tape
10,000.
there. That really covers it. I mean, this is such a powerful back and forth. The thing is, I think Keith Ellison here is getting away with kind of obscuring the truth by, there are some things here that Josh Hawley says that aren't quite accurate. He's really close, and the essence of what he's saying is correct. But things like we talked about, like the person who actually gave the donation in one of these instances was the brother of someone who was in the room. So, okay, he had this meeting and then gets a donation from the brother. That's not really the same thing, right, as getting a donation from someone in the room. Senator Hawley also has one other fact wrong. It actually didn't take place at Keith Ellison's office, this meeting. It took place at their offices. So that was one other fact that was a little bit off. But I think the idea that Keith Ellison there denied, I think 9 times, denied taking any kind of money. He did take money from people in this circle, from people who are involved and have these connections to the Feeding Our Future fraud. And so he's trying to be a little obtuse by saying, no, not at all. There is truth to this. There is truth in there. And if you want to get bogged down in the details, fine. But there's truth to the fact that he told those people in that meeting, let's go fight those guys. And then days later got an influx of donations. And his son, Jeremiah Ellison, who was serving on the Minneapolis City Council, also received an influx of donations on that same day from some of those individuals as well.
And at the end of the day, he did return these campaign donations. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't return them unless you had reasonable suspicion that they were, ill-gotten funds.
Yeah, exactly.
So I agree with your take. I think that he's basically being purposefully obtuse in the Senate hearing and kind of skirting the truth. In my opinion, I don't think he was being fully honest there. So are there consequences for that? That's kind of the next question in this line of thinking. If he wasn't fully honest, if Ellison, someone can show that he was holding back information that he had and saying that, he basically didn't take any money from the fraudsters, even though he now has returned those campaign donations. Are there consequences for that? We'll have to wait and see.
Exactly. I think that'll be very interesting to see if they actually do go after him for some sort of perjury charge. I have no idea, but we'll see.
Moving on a little closer to home, things have been. I would say there's been a lot of, what do they say? A lot of sound in the fury. A lot of sound, not a lot of things actually going on here at the Minnesota legislature. A lot of people yelling, nothing really getting done. We totaled up the number of bills passed, as you referenced, Catherine. Even with all of the fighting and the arguments and the protesting happening at the Capitol, only 3 bills have actually gotten passed so far this legislative session. We've had over 1,300 bills introduced, and 24 press conferences, hundreds of committee meetings, 17 days of floor session, and still just those 3 bills. So they must have been pretty important bills, right?
Yeah.
What was so important that Minnesota's 2 parties were able to come together and find common ground on and get passed?
Must be big.
Right, yeah. Well, the first bill changed the date for testing hemp edibles from January 1, 2026 to May 31st, 2027. So I'm sure you were waiting on that one. I mean, that's important.
No.
That's important.
Yeah.
The second bill changed the word shall to must regarding vehicles stopping for school buses.
Now, there's a lot of discourse around this school bus stoppage situation.
Surprisingly contentious. Yeah,
I refuse to engage personally, but there's a lot of discourse. I get shall, must, okay. But the rules around school bus stopping are way too confusing. I just want to put that out there as my personal opinion. I'm just always stopping no matter what if I see one. And I'm just when do I get to go again? You know, I'll just stop in an inordinate amount of time because I'm I don't know. When do I stop? When do I go? I don't want to get in trouble.
And if you do the wrong thing, there's some pretty hefty fines and I think maybe even jail time associated with it. So you don't want to get it wrong. Maybe we'll do a deep dive on school bus laws at some point in Minnesota. And of course, the third bill canceled Cesar Chavez after the New York Times reported he was a serial sex offender. I think that was just in the last week or so. Bill Walsh writes in his Capitol Watch that Chavez's history of collectivism, which bordered on Marxism, never really bothered Minnesota liberals. They were all, they were fine with that.
Yeah.
But the allegations of sexual abuse was a bridge too far. So the speed with which they passed a law repealing Cesar Chavez Day was breathtaking, he says, in his Capitol Watch report. So those are the 3 bills. I know, they're hard at work over there.
They're hard at work.
Minnesota
I mean, on one hand, this is a good thing, right? I don't like to see them, getting a lot done. Obviously, at the Capitol, I'm a conservative. I'd prefer they just, not do less, as they say. As the kids
Small
say,
government.
do less. But it seems like you would think that there would be a little bit more that has actually been produced when we have had all of this byplay going on. On this podcast, we talk about things every week that are happening, and yet nothing is really getting past the finish line.
Yeah, I agree. It's I'm grateful that we don't have a 2023, off the cliff session again, where we have one party just passing everything through. That was probably one of the most damaging legislative sessions that you and I will ever see in our lifetimes. And at the same time, it's frustrating to feel that, as conservatives, we're so close to getting good legislation passed, even repealing some of the bad things that were passed in the last few years. Like, we're so close. We're one vote away. We're 2 votes away. And we just can't get anything across the finish line because of the makeup in the legislature right now. Yeah. You saw we had a bill to reverse the DFL's car tab hike that, again, they passed in 2023, which is so funny. That completely failed on a party line vote in I think it was a House committee that it failed in. Both parties have their own talking points this year. Of course, the DFL has ICE and Trump, and, Republicans have fraud. Both parties are really hitting the affordability and cost of living crisis hard, though. And this is a bill that actually would have helped with that. It doesn't just claim to help with affordability. It actually would by walking back the insane hike that they passed in 2023. And of course, it died. It died on party line votes. Republicans voted yes. DFL voted no. And it's worth reminding everyone how bad this bill is, because I think that this law, it's not a bill, it's a law, they passed it in 23. I think it kind of flew under the radar at the time for a lot of people because there was so much happening. Yeah. You couldn't keep up with everything they were passing. The new formula that is now law in Minnesota means the average driver paid, this is from CBS News, $178 in registration taxes this year. It's a 20% increase. The 2023 bill didn't just change the state's overall formula for calculating license tab fees, it also changed the way it calculates the depreciation of your vehicle. The state calculates that your new car loses 5% of its value a year, so 10% over 2 years. The Kelley Blue Book estimates that over 2 years, the average new car loses 30% of its value. So you're paying so much more on your fees than your car is worth.
Yeah,
it's really slimy, I would say. A slimy way for government to get more of your tax dollars.
Yeah, I always have like these super high fees because I lease a new car. I have a Kia, okay? I don't have like anything great, but I have a Kia and it's new-ish and I lease it because like I don't know how to deal with cars. It's just like the only thing I can manage, okay? and then my tabs are so high and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm paying like, less than this in my monthly payment than is my tab fee, so my monthly payment, not all that big because it's a Kia, but my tabs are super expensive because it's a new car, right? So it's very frustrating, I think, for everyone. And it's funny how this is now like a Democrat thing where they're like pro high tab fees, because this was, Jesse Ventura's big issue back in the day was that's like all I know about him. Like, this was his issue, right? Was lower registration costs on cars. So I don't know. It's funny that they've kind of flipped on that. I mean, now they just want as much money as possible, I guess.
Yeah, while at the same time saying that, we need to lower cost of living for people. We need better affordability for people.
Yeah, but they're not serious.
They're absolutely not. And it's so gross, the argument that they gave for why they struck this bill down. You have Brad Tabke, who's the co-chair of this committee, Transportation, Finance, and Policy Committee, who said if you vote yes for this bill, you're cutting teachers' pay and you're cutting home health care pay. That is such BS. I think we were funding those things just fine before you passed the car tab hike in 2023, Brad.
Yeah, exactly. And the way that they all, they're not getting a lot done, but they're using the session to message for the election. I think that's another key takeaway here, is that they are still doing all of they're appearing to do all this work when in reality what they're doing is trying to set up their messaging for the election, introducing bills like the Democrats will about ICE agents and things that will no longer really have an impact in the near future, but are based on trying to keep people remembering what just happened because they think that will be good messaging for them in the midterms. So again, a frustrating, just playing politics from both sides at the legislature and not really accomplishing much for actual Minnesotans.
Yeah. And hopefully, again, some things might get done. There's hope for the lifting the ban on new nuclear in Minnesota. We hear there might be some hope to actually get that across the finish line here.
They did a bill to do a study. I mean, these people, come on. You don't need another study. What is another study going to do on nuclear? We have all the data we need. Yeah. But they just can't. This is government for you, man.
Yeah. There's also been movement on the bill to create an Office of Inspector General, which, of course, has crazy bipartisan support in Minnesota, and it died in the House last year, again, along party lines, basically. But it's inching its way through the House. It keeps inching its way through committee after committee. So, yeah, we'll see where that goes. It's hugely popular, so I think it'd be unwise for the DFL to keep blocking that this year, but we'll see.
Well, should we get to the kind of the story of the weekend? Although, again, it didn't really impact my life. The No Kings protest.
Yeah.
Apparently 100,000-ish plus Minnesotans. Can I just say this 100,000 number? They've been using that number since before the rally started.
Oh yeah, we're expecting 100,000. Well, and then the rally organizers kept saying 200,000 after it was over, and then the state patrol came out and was like, no, we only counted 100,000.
Yeah, okay, whatever. Like Bill Glahn kept tweeting things like, "Do you think it'll hit 10 million, 20 million, 50 million?" I'm like, literally, that was it. All the local media was on it. 100,000 plus Minnesotans gathered at the state capitol Saturday for the country's flagship No Kings protest against authoritarianism.
Kings, ICE. It was pretty vague.
Yeah, there's some funny interviews of people who were there that, oh, why are you here today? Everyone has a different answer, and they're all pretty off the wall. There was a lot of song and dance.
A lot of musical performances. Bruce Springsteen, of course, performed.
Whoever that is, by the way. I'm sorry, I do not know. Or Bill was listing some other people that were there. Never heard of them. He's they're in their 80s.
Which goes back to my theory that this is people reliving the glory days of Woodstock.
Exactly. You are obviously correct. So we'll get into some of those more fun highlights. But first, maybe we should start with the more serious programming. Our own governor, Tim Walz, spoke at this rally here in Minnesota at the Capitol. Let's play. I picked out, I think, the best part of his speech. Let's play it.
It's got the flannel, thank God.
Oh, gosh.
And I will add a special thank you and a special acknowledgement that we will never leave the side of our Somali Minnesotans. Here's our pledge to you. Our Somali Minnesotans, your great-grandchildren will still be here when that orange clown is in the dustbin of history. You will be here. They call us radicals. I see that the president said it's a bunch of radicals. You're damn right we've been radicalized. Radicalized by compassion, radicalized by decency, radicalized by due process, radicalized by democracy, and radicalized to do all we can to oppose authoritarianism. So for those of you watching at home, welcome to the North Star State. Welcome to the land of hope and dreams.
Wow. That poor man. His voice was so hoarse. He knew there was a microphone, right? He didn't have to be screaming like that.
I know. He was just really feeling it. I mean, it's crazy. I think radicalized by due process might be my favorite line from that. Oh my gosh, when have the Democrats ever been the party of due process? My gosh.
Radicalized by compassion was a highlight for me as well. Yeah.
I mean, of course, that's their number one message, is that they are the nice, compassionate ones, and that the right are the evil, anti-immigrant ones. That was a huge theme of this,
Yeah.
There was a big sign behind it that said immigrants are our neighbors, I think, maybe. And that was definitely a major theme, was trying to have this idea that people on the right are anti-immigrant. It's really strange.
Which is so tired. It's been put to bed so many times. That's what they were saying during the last presidential election. They were saying Trump's going to lose the Hispanic vote. He's going to lose the black vote, lose the immigrant vote, because Republicans and the GOP hate immigrants.
Yeah.
And the results of that election speak for themselves. The Republicans are anti-illegal immigrants, and I think everyone knows that. And so when you get these huge rallies in the left, and of course our governor coming out and saying the right is anti-immigrant, immigrants make our country great. You know, it's no shit. We know.
Yeah.
But it's just the illegal immigrants and the immigrants who are stealing our tax dollars that we really have a problem with.
Right,
the fraudsters.
Exactly. And wanting to have some another look at our immigration system does not make you anti-immigrant. It makes you practical about moving forward. Maybe we should have a better immigration system. The system quite sucks, actually.
Yeah, having a nuanced immigration policy or a nuanced opinion on our immigration policy does not make you anti the immigrant living next door to you.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Not at all. Okay, let's go to Amy Klobuchar, of course, now running for governor herself. She did not speak at the rally, but she did post a video on social media, and she's wearing one of those loon hats with the loon that kind of looks like it's fighting or whatever.
She looks like she's raiding Tim Walz's wardrobe. The flannel and
she's got a
flannel loon hat and
rising loon or something. I don't know. Too much. Go ahead, Isaac.
I'm here in St. Paul at the biggest rally we have ever seen in Minnesota. We have been at the center of America's heartbreak, but today we are at the center of America's courage and hope, stretched out in front of the entire Capitol Mall. And that's because we are here to say there are no kings in America. The only king is the law. And what matters here is that we are going to stand up, and we stand together, Democrats, independents, and Republicans, to say that our liberties matter.
Again, like the DFL and Amy Klobuchar and Tim Walz being the party of like liberties is so unserious. You have these people, hundreds of thousands, 100,000 gathering on the steps of the Minnesota Capitol to freely protest in a free country where there are no political repercussions or societal repercussions for doing so. You don't have a king. You don't live in an authoritarian society. And we say this, it's such an insult to the people who do live in authoritarian societies and countries around the world, who do live under dictatorships, because you don't. The reality is you don't. You do have a constitution that protects your rights and your right to assemble, and it really bugs me.
Yeah, they can't come to the conclusion that, like, they just can't realize or accept that the majority of people in this country voted for our president.
Yeah.
You know, that's the key here, is he's not a king because the majority of people voted for this agenda and voted for this president, and they just refuse to understand that. And I love here how she says Democrats, Republicans, and independents are coming together, as if they've created some like coalition of people on all sides.
Yeah.
No, this is the left wing and their left wing base. It always has been. It has never been anything different. What you're seeing in the streets right now is they're the same people that come out for all these protests. Good for them. They're welcome to go protest. But this is not a new coalition of people they've put together because everyone is worried about authoritarianism. No, these are just your classic left-wingers that go out and protest whatever people on the right are doing. It's also like the least grassroots movement ever, if we want to get into that too. Like, it's highly funded by George Soros. This is that Indivisible Project is the group that runs these No Kings protests. They get a huge portion of their money from the Open Society Foundation, which is funded by George Soros. So look, that's whatever. Okay, he's allowed to do that, but this is not some we the people sort of movement. This is big money on the left bringing out their base to protest because they don't like what's going on in the White House.
So that's a little sliver, a little taste of the politicians who were speaking at the No Kings rally. But what about the people who attended?
Yeah. There was this one guy we had that was interviewed on the street, and I think he was actually sporting what you may call orange face. Why don't we hear from him why he was there?
Out of office. Yeah. Would you like J.D. Vance to be the president
No,
then?
I would not.
Okay.
Yeah, I would not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who would you like to be the president?
Kamala Harris right now, but she didn't win, but
Can I point out something that we say no kings and no authoritarianism, but Kamala Harris, no one voted for her.
Yes, they did. Half the country voted for her, so let's not go there.
No one was voted for her to be the nominee.
Yes, they did.
Isn't that what, like, authoritarian?
You're going down the wrong road right now with me. I wouldn't go any further.
Oh, what does that mean?
Like I'm not going to talk to you anymore. That's what it means.
I just think it's ironic that no one voted for her to be the nominee. They just selected her like a king gets selected, right?
But keep it to yourself, okay? Bye. Have a good day.
Well,
see ya.
End of conversation, I guess.
He seems like he might need some sort of psychiatric intervention, but I assume there were more normal people there, right?
Do you? I don't. But let's see.
Let's see. What else do we have here? Go ahead with this one.
Stop the tape. Am I missing something here? What's the frog? What are the frogs referencing? Is that a reference I'm not getting? Is that if there's like a frog king?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just they're just sticking it to Donald Trump, clearly.
Wow. Is that what you got out of that?
No, not at all. I mean, what in the world? Like, I'm sorry. I have no idea. They seem to be having a joyful time anyway, so I guess good for them. But there was so, like, the musical aspect of this really cracked me up. There was, like, choirs performing all over the country, singing their nice songs. Bruce Springsteen, who is someone I've never heard of but apparently exists, and then some other lady really did a horrible, horrible job at the Minneapolis. And I'm no singer, but I don't get up there and try and sing. The musical element was tough.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway from this whole weekend, the whole rally, was I was just shocked by the lack of substance there was in whether you're hearing from the politicians themselves, the activists, the event organizers who are speaking to the crowd, or whether you're talking to, man of the street style interviews, you're hearing from the people who are attending the rally. No one really knew why they were there specifically. No one could point to a specific policy or something the administration was doing. I expected to hear more maybe on Iran, but really you just kept hearing authoritarianism, you kept hearing kings, but they were there for different reasons. It was so artificial. And I think that it speaks to what you were saying, Catherine, about how people, especially, the radical liberals, the base here in Minnesota, when they get the marching orders that there's going to be a rally, they show up whether or not they necessarily know why. And that was the sense I got coming away from this.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. I thought the exact same thing. And the man on the street sort of interviews definitely showed that. People were all over the place. And so that, I think we just have to see it. I don't know if they accomplished anything. They definitely made headlines. I saw it in the local news if you read that kind of thing. But otherwise, I'm not sure anything really will come out of this other than that publicity.
Now, if you are listening and you want to be part of a moment, a rally that is not vague, that could have actual real implications, good implications for Minnesotans' lives, you need to come to the Capitol with us on Tuesday, April 14th. We are having a huge rally there for education freedom, excellence, choice, to try to take our state back, really, through the school system, because the schools are failing. We need to give families more options, more ways to customize their kids' education. And that starts with school choice. It does. Yeah. And these bills that are moving through the legislature right now are going to be heard on that day, on April 14th. And we need to show up at the Capitol, make sure that Governor Walz and the legislature knows that Minnesotans want this. Minnesotans are ready to have a real say in their kids' education. And we're ready for education freedom. So it's going to be from noon to 1 on April 14th. And again, they had no kings. I think this is our chance to get out there and show that we're ready to take our state back.
Yeah, absolutely. For something real and tangible. Our students in Minnesota deserve better than the education they're getting right now in our public school system. And so let's go actually fight for those students. And let's try and bring change, not just slogans with our rally.
You can get all of the details on americanexperiment.org/events. Now we're going to kick things over to our conversation with U.S. Senator Tim Sheehy, who is also our speaker at the spring annual dinner gala. Stay tuned. American Experiment is supported by thousands of individuals like you. To join the movement, go to www.americanexperiment.org and click the yellow donate button. From all of us here, thank you. We are so excited to be joined now by U.S. Senator from Montana, Tim Sheehy, who has had such an incredible career and is now serving, of course, in the U.S. Senate. But most excitingly for us, you will be our featured speaker at our upcoming annual dinner gala. Welcome to the show, Senator. We are so happy to have you with us.
Thank you. And I noticed you almost said Minnesota there when you said what state I was from.
A little bit of a Freudian slip since you are also a native Minnesotan.
Yes, as I like to tell people, I'm the only Republican Minnesotan serving in the U.S. Senate. So it's an honor to be there. But thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to hear a little bit more about what brought you into this role. You grew up in Minnesota, and then you had a super impressive career. You were a Navy SEAL and went into even founding some of your own companies. Would you mind giving us a little bit of your own personal backstory and let us know how you ended up in Congress?
Yeah, so it wasn't ever a plan. Certainly didn't intend to enter elected politics at any point, but I was a very motivated young kid, and I always had a plan of where I was going to be in 5 years. I knew exactly where I was going to be. And it's funny, I tell people when they say, man, you're the youngest Republican senator, you must have had this all mapped out from the time you were a kid. And I said, you know what, if you'd asked me when I was 16, 21, 26, 30, 35, where I was going to be in 5 years, I would have given you a very specific answer, and I would have been wrong every single time. And not just a little bit wrong, like massively wrong, completely wrong. But yes, I did grow up in the Anoka, Arden Hills, Shoreview area. My neighbor growing up was a Navy pilot, a Korean War era Navy pilot, a guy named Steve Tebow was his son who taught me how to fly. His name was Harry Tebow. And the Tebow family were just great people that I was able to learn from growing up. And my parents were my dad grew up working construction, got into real estate. My mom was a homemaker, and my older brother Matt. We had a great little family, and grew up, out on the lake like everyone in Minnesota does, and never really imagined political office would be in the future. But I wanted to go into the military since as early as I can remember, since I was a little kid running around the woods in the backyard. And I lived up against the fence of, I don't know if you're familiar with the old Arden Hills manufacturing plant for ammunition up there. And, up in Arden Hills, they have the big military base that for many decades made a lot of our machine gun bullets. It's shut down, I think, post-Vietnam. I don't know exactly when, but my whole life it's been abandoned. So, as a kid, I used to always, sneak in there and run around the old abandoned buildings. And, I thought that was the coolest thing ever, was just all that old military stuff. So I knew I was going to do that eventually at one point. And obviously in high school, as I'm sure you young ladies remember, and 9/11 was the definitive moment of our childhood, really. Obviously our grandparents talked about Pearl Harbor. Our parents talked about the JFK assassination. For our generations, 9/11 was kind of that before and after moment. Your life is kind of divided into before 9/11 and after 9/11. And for me, I was in high school at the time, and I knew I was going to go in the military, but that definitely changed the complexion of my desire to serve. It went from just wanting to be in the military because I thought it was cool. All children of the 80s, all boys in the 80s wanted to be Maverick and Top Gun. Realizing, hey, this isn't just flying jets around and having fun and playing volleyball. Like, we're at war now. Our nation's been attacked, and our nation needs its sons and daughters to step up and serve. So it kind of changed my focus around service from it's just something that I wanted to do to something I felt like I was really called to do, and felt passionate that it was an obligation. That as someone who is so privileged to grow up in this amazing country, that in a time of need, it was an obligation for me to join up and serve. So I went into the Naval Academy right out of high school. And while I was at the academy, I met my wife, Carmen. She was also a midshipman at the academy. So we ended up commissioning into the military around the same time. She went into the Marine Corps as a Marine Corps officer. I went into the Navy as a SEAL team leader, as you mentioned, and was honored to lead SEALs all over the world. Did several deployments, Middle East, Iraq, Afghanistan, South America, elsewhere. And it was just an honor to lead some of the best Americans that have ever lived on some of the most dangerous operations and defend our country. And although I intended to spend more time in the military, I ended up getting wounded and injured in the line of duty. So ended up getting discharged and had to kind of figure out what I was going to do in life. And like I mentioned earlier, I never thought I'd be the CEO of a company, but I had an idea around some of our technology we use. So I started a family of companies, and long story short, all veteran founding team, along with some great mentors. We started two guys in a barn and it created about 500 jobs over the course of about a decade, and about $1 billion in enterprise value in aviation, aerospace, military technology, agriculture, and loved business. It was a lot of fun. And then, of course, we saw the terrible disasters that happened in the Biden administration, from the Afghan withdrawal to the border invasion and everything else, and realized that we were in a tough spot, and our country was on the verge of really irreversible damage. So I was asked to consider running for office, and I did, and here we are.
As someone who saw combat in Afghanistan, what was that like watching the like you said, disastrous pullout there a few years ago? I mean, you've got this long record of service in the military, and of course now public service. I mean, it's really quite impressive. You've been awarded Bronze Star for Valor for heroism in combat, Purple Heart Medal, Joint Service Commendation Medal with Valor. I could go on and on. What was that like for you watching that unfold?
It was really visceral. It was a cocktail of emotions I'd never felt before, truly. And, in my company, we had a lot of veterans, way higher than the average percentage. About 40% of our employees were veterans at that time. And my wife, of course, combat veteran of Afghanistan, and all my best friends. You guys understand how the military works. You become friends quickly. You stay close the rest of your lives. And watching that happen for me was quite literally a turning point. I had never been politically active really before that. I think I had like a $200 donation to Mitt Romney in 2012. Like I wasn't a super active political guy. But that disaster, I remember being on the phone. I was flying one of my companies. We were an aero firefighting company. So I was flying water bombers in California at the time, Chico, California. And I was between water bombing missions. So we were back at base refueling. And I remember being on the phone This went on for days during the disastrous retreat here, and talking to friends of mine in theater, interpreters, commandos, Afghans I'd worked with, and being on the phone with them as they're just trying to get their children out alive before the Taliban starts to literally cut their heads off, because anybody who worked with us was on the kill list, and anybody who cooperated with the Americans was on the kill list. So it was really a sense of betrayal that we felt. Many of us did. We formed a whole veterans network to get people out. And we were focused on getting people out that we had personally worked with, that we knew, that, we weren't trying to bring in thousands of random unvetted terrorists like we've seen entered. We were trying to say, hey, this guy served with me on dozens of missions. I know this guy. He was on our side and he's been left behind. So it was a visceral reaction to see that. Of course, once our 13 service members were killed at Abbey Gate, that just ratcheted that up. And in the wake of that, is when I started to get involved politically. That's when I started to lean into politics. Really, as a donor, I'd sold one of my businesses, so I became a large donor to the cause, and was speaking at a number of events supporting other candidates, really trying to spread the message that, listen, this act alone was terrible, but the message that this act of weakness and feebleness sends to the world is far more serious than I think people understand. And of course, that proved to be right. Whether it was the invasion of Ukraine, attacks on October 7th, China upping their pressure on us, the Iranian proxy group all over the world getting emboldened, like the Red Sea attacks. So I saw that as a turning point. Couple that with the disastrous policies we saw across the rest of the Biden administration, from our border invasion, which was causing a huge increase in crime around the whole country, and even places like Montana, which folks would typically not associate with border crime, absolutely saw a huge spike in violent crime as a direct result of the cartels injecting fentanyl and cartel activity into our state. So that got me involved. And that event is what really got me off top dead center. I'd always been a conservative guy, but I just was not an active political person. And boy, that got me off the sideline. It got me involved. And now here we are.
Well, we're certainly glad you did. So fast forward to today, when we look at President Trump's approach to foreign policy is certainly much different than President Biden's, thank God. And look at what's happening right now, our military action in Iran. Do you like what you're seeing from the president? Have you been supportive of what's going on right now?
I've been very supportive. In fact, I've been one of the vocal voices encouraging him to do this in the first place. Listen, he crafts his own policy, but at the end of the day, he does take input. And despite what a lot of people say, one of the best things about this president is he does take input. He reaches out to people, engages what they think is the right thing to do. And I've had a great pleasure of having a good relationship with him. And in this particular area, from Midnight Hammer last year through this operation, I've been a vocal proponent of us addressing this threat. This has been a 47-year threat to America. They've been a visceral, savage adversary of ours. They fueled the proxy groups all over the world, from the Shia militias to Hezbollah to Hamas, the Houthi rebels, to drug cartels in South America. And their foreign policy is death to America. They literally want to kill you, me, and our entire families and destroy our way of life. They want a global caliphate that subjugates every Western value to the will of Allah in their eyes. And it's a militant, destructive ideology. And you don't have to speculate. You just watch what they actually do. Watch the savagery of October 7th. Watch what they do to their prisoners. Watch their rhetoric. Watch what they do to their own citizens, murdering them in the streets, beating women to death, hanging people from cranes. And when I see our media, New York Times, Washington Post, defending this regime, defending their actions as if this is self-determination, as if they have a right to do this, and criticizing our government for this righteous act, it's really disgusting. I have no problem with debate. We're a constitutional republic. We're a democratically elected body. We should be asking each other tough questions. I got no problem with folks voicing concern over going into open conflict with any other country. That's our job as legislators. It's our obligation as Americans to speak up. But there's a fine line between asking questions and advocating for a terrorist enemy of our country. And that's exactly what a lot of the other side is doing right now. It's really disgusting and shameful, and it's a betrayal of our troops overseas who've been getting killed by these Iranians for decades. So thus far, we've seen a fantastic operation. We're 28 days in now, 28 days. So folks are saying this is a forever conflict. We're 4 weeks into this. And by the way, Iran's been attacking us for 47 years. And the first president ever, 7 presidencies have gone by, as Iran has murdered our troops while they slept. 1983, Khobar Towers, USS Cole, our embassy in Iran, the Achille Laurel, terrorist attacks all over the world. The only time we ever responded directly and militarily was in 2020 when President Trump took out Qasem Soleimani, the mastermind behind these attacks, Midnight Hammer and this. So Trump is the first president to ever hit back at Iran. Every other president of both parties has basically sat there and taken it and said, you know what? We're going to find them. We're going to put sanctions on them. I mean, that's equivalent of in your home neighborhood. We have a serial killer walking around, raping families, killing them, burning them alive in their own home. And the city's response is, we're going to send him a $50 fine. And the logic is, well, we don't want to be mean to this serial killer because he might be even meaner to us. So let's just send him a fine. And they keep fining him for 40 years. And eventually they say, you know what? He's fining us too much. We're going to pay him money. We're going to try to pay him to stop being mean to us, which is exactly what Obama and Biden did. We're going to give him cash. We're going to give him 50 grand. Say, hey, dude.
Pallets of cash, right?
Yes, exactly. Pallets of cash.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, that serial killer doesn't take that cash and become a peaceful person. He takes that cash and he buys more bullets and knives and guns. So it was time to take this threat out. All of our Gulf state allies wanted this to happen. They're glad it's happening. If you saw the ambassador UAE on TV today saying, finish the job, don't stop. So this is the right thing. It's a righteous act. It's right for America. And there's something else that I'll say that hasn't been said enough. This isn't just about Iran. Iran is a proxy state, just like Venezuela was, for foreign nations that want to supplant us as the world power. They're a proxy state for China. They're a proxy state for Russia. Russia loved having the Venezuelan regime, as did China. They laundered all the oil money they needed to dodge global sanctions. China loves a sanctioned Iran because that means they can only sell their oil for cents on the dollar to China. That's how they get such cheap energy. China loves having Iran constantly causing wars in the Middle East. So that ties up our force structure. 11 aircraft carriers we have, about 3 are deployable at any one time, and usually 2 to 3 of them are in an area the size of the Great Lakes because they're in the Persian Gulf, Red Sea, and Eastern Med. It's like having 3 of our 11 aircraft carriers steaming in circles in Lake Superior. That's what we've been doing for 30 years. China likes that. It allows them to have their ghost fleet push all over Southeast Asia and frankly all over the Pacific Ocean unfettered. So China has loved the status quo of a destabilizing Iran. It's been bad for America and good for them. So finishing off this fight is the right answer. It's going to be good for the region. It's going to be good for the world. And it's going to allow us to shift our focus where it needs to be, which is on competing with China.
There have been some rumblings coming out of the White House lately that we might be getting close to a peace deal with Iran. Have you heard anything like that?
Well, listen, I mean, obviously, none of us want open conflict with any country, especially those of us who've gone to war and lost friends. We don't want to be in a war with anybody. So if there is a genuine off-ramp to peace here, I would think anybody of right mind would take it. But the truth is, what this regime has shown us is they can't be negotiated with. Whatever deal they make, they're going to renege on it. And their viewpoint is they must say or do anything to stay in power. So I don't think we're going to see any deal short of every member of this regime surrendering and leaving the country and surrendering all power, because we know that if this regime is kept in place, there's never really going to be true peace with them. But, we'll see what concessions are willing to be made. We have operated a fantastic campaign here. Secretary Hegseth, another Minnesotan, I might add, and General Kane doing a great job architecting this. We're in close touch with them. And of course, our men and women in uniform are crushing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd love to move into another issue. I'm sure that's very pressing as a senator. We were talking before this. Wow, we got so lucky. We're talking to a United States senator right now with all of this going on. I mean, it's really amazing. So thank you for your time, Senator. But I just saw that if Congress doesn't act by Saturday night, the DHS funding lapse will become the longest shutdown of any federal agency in U.S. history. We have a senator. Do you have any insider updates? Are we getting closer to another deal, a deal at home to fund DHS?
All I got to say is this is an embarrassment for the country. It's an embarrassment for me personally being here. I think our side is incredibly frustrated. Listen, at the end of the day, partisanship aside, there are certain things that shouldn't have to be subject to partisan games. Our federal employees, especially those who keep us safe, people like our Border Patrol agents who are not being paid right now, our TSA agents who are not being paid right now, Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, whose literally specific job is to protect us from terrorism. These people aren't getting paid. Coast Guard, we have people who aren't getting paid. And remember, this is the second shutdown in 6 months. Chuck Schumer shut us down last fall as well. the whole government at that point, or the vast majority of it. Now we're DHS only, but still, this is an embarrassment. And it's being caused specifically by Schumer and the Democrats for one reason and one reason alone. They know that when we have unified government, Republican Senate, Republican House, Republican White House, conservative majority in the Supreme Court, they know that anything that happens on this administration's watch gets blamed on Republicans. This is an intentional engineered shutdown, the second one in 2 months, because they want to make the country fail right now. They want inflation up. They want expensive gas. They want long lines. They want dysfunction because it reflects badly on us. It does. The average American doesn't research Senate procedure. They don't follow John Thune and Chuck Schumer's every tweet. They're busy with their lives. So all they know is, you know what? Lines are long. Unions are going on strike. People aren't getting paid. Must be Trump's fault. And of course, the media is always ready and willing to help them push that narrative. This is a disgrace to our country, and it's an embarrassment. We can play partisan games up here on the Hill all day long. But right now, Democrat senators are getting paid to show up to work every day. They're getting paid $175,000 to show up to work. Yesterday in the Commerce Committee, the Commerce Science Transportation Committee oversees FAA, NASA, Coast Guard. We're responsible for the legislation and funding around those agencies. The Democrats boycotted the hearing yesterday. Didn't show up. And in that hearing, we were supposed to confirm some nominations, some promotions of the Coast Guard, pass some important legislation around the security of our nation. They just didn't show up because they wanted to protest this shutdown. They're the ones causing the shutdown. I mean, you feel like you're taking crazy pills sometime around here. It's like, what the hell? What are you protesting? You're causing it. It's like, you've ever seen the movie Blazing Saddles when the sheriff comes out with a gun to his own head, like, stop or I'll shoot. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, you caused the shutdown and now you're protesting your own shutdown. We have voted repeatedly to open up the government. Now they want a deal. They say they want concessions from the administration, from Senate Republicans on how we're going to reform DHS so that we don't have more mistakes like we had in Minneapolis. The administration has literally agreed to all their demands, said, great, okay, fine. We don't like all this, body cameras, all this stuff, but we'll do it. We'll do it because we believe we should be paying our employees who are working every day. We've agreed to those demands. Oh, then they change them again. Then we agree to those demands. They change them again. Agree to those demands. We've changed it again. So at this point, as of this morning, we've essentially said, guys, this is it. We first of all, we've given you everything you've asked for, and you've moved the goalpost about 5 times now. There's nothing more to give. There's no, other than ending all deportations and making illegal immigration legal again, like under the Biden years. There's nothing more we can give. And essentially, I believe that's where they want this to go. They have 2 desired end states here. Number one is they want the government shut down because it makes Republicans look bad and they want to crash the country for the midterms. And number 2, as I think is now quite obvious, they want illegal immigration unfettered. They want massive amounts of illegal immigrants into this country that they will then ply with massive benefits so that they vote for them. It's that simple. And people call it like a conspiracy theory. It's like, I don't know how it's a conspiracy theory when it's exactly what was going on for 4 years under Biden. And as we're trying to solve that problem that the vast majority of Americans want solved, they're trying to create it again. So I hope we're getting closer to a deal. But like I said, we've been close to a deal repeatedly over the last week, and they've backed off every time. So this is a Democrat problem, 100%. I have to commend the admin. They've been extremely constructive. As you know, sometimes, Trump is not always constructive. He's like, screw these guys, blow it up. I'm not talking to them. Him and his team have been very constructive here. And so have the Senate Republican side. So my hope is Schumer and his colleagues come to their senses and realize that politics is a game that we got to play, but we shouldn't be playing it with the livelihoods of our workers, and we shouldn't be playing it with the safety of our country.
Well, I do sense your frustration, Senator Sheehy. I have the same frustration that I think every American is right there with you. I saw then earlier today, your colleague, Senator Ron Johnson, he came out and said, in light of the dysfunction that you've just explained to us, I'm not sure how things could get much worse by ending the filibuster, which is one thing that the president has advocated for as well. What's your opinion on that as being maybe the only way forward?
Well, listen, if I had any confidence we could do it, we would. I mean, I've only been in this body a year. I don't have some amazing connection to the filibuster. That's this amazing constitutional rule. It's not in the Constitution. As you know, the Senate has evolved over the years in various ways. Senators weren't even directly elected by the people. They were appointed by the state legislatures. That was changed by the 17th Amendment in 1913. Of course, then the filibuster was created after that, and 67 votes. And so, point being, we don't need to go through every iteration. This isn't enshrined in the Constitution. The filibuster is a good thing. It was created with the best of intent. I think it's produced a lot of good legislation over the years, but when one party chooses to use it as nothing but an obstruction tool to crash our own country, it's unacceptable. So I completely agree with Ron. At this point, opening our government, securing our borders, securing our borders. Let's not forget, our Border Patrol agents who secure our borders right now are not getting paid. I don't blame them for walking off the job if they have to go get another employment. Twice in 6 months now, they're not getting paid. And of course, that's after 4 years of being demonized by the Democrats during the Biden administration, being brought in and accused of terrible, terrible things. So, I think there's broad support for ending it in the conference. Unfortunately, there's also broad support for keeping it in the conference. So, unfortunately, I don't think it's a realistic thing anytime soon. I would certainly support it at this point, but it doesn't look like we have the numbers for it. So we're going to have to try to solve this without it. Now, there are paths to fix this without that. There's paths the administration can take with declaring some emergencies around certain agencies. There's also paths we can take through reconciliation to try to fund certain aspects of the government. So until we have the votes to blow the filibuster, we'll have to find other ways around this to get it done.
What about the talking filibuster? Have you thought about that at all? Do you think that's a viable option?
Listen, obviously that's been floated recently. It's one of those plans that I'll say briefs really well on paper. But when you start doing the math with it, what if we did the talking filibuster, which I don't think anyone has any philosophical problem with doing that. We're not changing any rules. We're simply following the rules as they exist. As you've seen in the past year and a half, Chuck Schumer will do absolutely everything in his power as a Senate Minority Leader to shut things down. Look at our nominee process. This is the most obstruction we've ever seen in the history of America by a huge margin of nominees, presidential nominees. Typically, there's about 1,200 presidential nominees. Usually the top 20, 30, they go through the full hearing process. They get committee hearings. They get committee votes, floor votes. They go through cloture. They go through the whole exhaustive process. For the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, the top 20, 30 posts. And then it kind of winnows down to, all right, we're going to talk to the next 30 or 40. We'll do quick interviews. And then we're going to throw the rest into a big package and we're going to vote them all in at once because we don't have time to do this. If all we did was nominations, no Senate would do anything. And it's never once happened in the history of our country that every single nominee has been forced to go through the entire process, which is the right of the minority to do. Well, Chuck Schumer has done that this Senate. The most percentage ever that was voted through on a voice vote as a package was about 70% of nominees. That was under Trump's first term. So about 70%. I'm sorry, that was under Biden's term. About 70% of the nominees were voted through as a single package so they could get to work and run the country. They've fought every single one, 1,200 nominees. So where I'm going with that is it's very clear Schumer will do everything he can to slow everything down that we do. So if we go down the path of a talking filibuster, which I have no problem doing philosophically, but practically speaking, if we started the talking filibuster today and every single senator had their speeches and Chuck Schumer did every procedural hurdle he could do to slow us down by forcing opening and closing executive session, by forcing debate, by forcing votes, by forcing amendment votes, privilege resolutions, blah, 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 that would quite literally drag through the midterms elections. The Senate would be closed for business because the whole point of the talking filibuster is we control the floor and we don't stop talking until we pass a bill. They're not going to quit. There's no incentive for them to quit because we're the ones that get blamed. Now we would be the ones shutting down the government while we're talking about it. The SAVE Act is absolutely, we got to do it. Voter ID, no question. In fact, today, just a couple hours ago, we put a bill on the floor to require voter ID nationwide. Require it. Guess what? No surprise, the Democrats voted against it as they always do. So this is an important issue that we need to attack, and it would be worth, as you said, ending the filibuster to get it done. Unfortunately, the talking filibuster would mean we get nothing done until the election. No nominees, no judges, no judicial appointments, no legislation of any kind. It would grind the country to a halt until the midterms. And not only do I think that's bad policy, I think it's very bad politics. I think we get crushed in the midterms because of it, and Schumer would use every opportunity. So, we have to remember that there's always, equal opposite reaction. Sometimes plans sound really good on paper. Oh, it'll be great. We'll do the X, Y, and Z. Well, we got to bake in what the enemy is going to do too. And they are going to go after us in every way possible to slow this down. So I think it's more complicated than some have led us to believe. So ultimately, we'll try to reopen the DHS here shortly. I think we have a deal that's on the table that might be accepted. And hopefully after that, we can get to the SAVE Act.
Now, before we run out of time with you today, I did want to get your thoughts as someone who grew up in Minnesota and left as an outsider looking in today. What do you make of what's become of this state? I mean, we've had this embarrassing fraud scandal blow up. We had all of the ICE mess, the protests, and the 2 citizens killed. What do you make as someone who grew up here and is looking back on your native state?
Well, it's sad, first of all. I mean, folks who say what happened to Minnesota, obviously, as you well know, and as many of us know, I have to remind people, we're the only state that didn't vote for Ronald Reagan in '84. So, Minnesota's liberal roots haven't just sprouted up here in the last few years. Now, of course, Walter Mondale was on the ticket, so there was a home roots there. But Minnesota's socialist roots and that collectivist mindset of our Scandinavian farmer settlers goes back a long ways. And I think, the Democrats of the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, which I'll add and remind you, Montana was a heavily Democrat state for about a century. Montana just became Republican in the last decade. We had 2 Democrat senators for almost a century. Right now, our whole delegation is Republican for the first time ever since statehood. So we had that same Scandinavian settler roots in Montana that kind of had that collectivist mindset and led to a long period of Democrat domination. Minnesota has that too. Unfortunately, as the tree split, the Montana Democrat history was the type of people who were pro-gun, pro-choice, pro-law and order, God-fearing Democrat. You don't really have those anymore. If you're those first 4 things, you're voting Republican. Montana still had those relatively recently. And largely that was because the union vote. We had a huge mining industry and a railroad in Montana. So real heavy labor connection. So kind of that blue dog Democrat, the blue collar guys I just described that were, now pretty firmly Republican. Obviously, Montana took that branch of the tree. Minnesota took the other branch of the tree, which is going this crazy woke Hamas transgender branch of the party, where it's they literally like illegal immigrants better than citizens. They think, Hamas terrorists are better than police officers and our own troops. They think that the regime of the Ayatollah is a justified, self-determined government that's legitimate. They would rather give benefits to illegal immigrants than veterans, which is exactly what, the Biden administration is doing. So it's really sad to see how it's gone. It's sad to see, I have no problem with political differences with anybody. I grew up in Minnesota, where obviously a red guy in a blue state. But when those differences start tacking into, you're going to release murderers onto our streets. You're going to have someone who's been arrested 73 times. You're going to put him back on the street out of a sense of compassion, even though we know for a fact, an unequivocal fact, that person is going to violate again and again and again and terrorize our communities. So it's incredibly frustrating to watch. Obviously, the fraud is just, I wasn't surprised growing up. I was a volunteer firefighter, and we do volunteer shifts down in St. Paul. And it was never a surprise when we started hearing the massive structural fraud going on in the Somali community. I think for any of us who had to respond down there to medical calls or anything, you're like, yeah, of course. I mean, it was pretty obvious what was happening here. These people aren't working. They're not going to their jobs every day. They're not paying into the system. And now we find out where they just passively taking from the system. They were actively undermining and defrauding the system, which is incredibly frustrating for someone like me. I've been to Africa, been to the Middle East. We bring these refugees in with a sense of compassion and generosity. Americans are more generous than any other country in the world to bring these people in and say, listen, you are fleeing hardship. We want to bring you here and give you another chance. And for them to come into our home and literally steal from us and defraud us and laugh about it while they're doing it is just disgusting and embarrassing. The fact that it's now clear the government of the state of Minnesota knew this was happening the entire time and intentionally swept it under the rug is a disgrace. And anybody who says the government didn't know what was going on, they're lying through their teeth. I mean, part of some of my businesses was contracting with the government, like aerial firefighting. And I mean, to get $10,000 paid out from the government, you had to fill out so much paperwork. You had to get audited. You had to have, reams of paper out the ass. You had to have spreadsheets and ledgers just to get paid anything. It was crazy. And like, guys, I'm spending more money on the paperwork to get this money than you're paying me. And I mean, they go through every line item. So don't tell me that $19 billion walked out the door and nobody knew what was going on. They knew, they were a part of it, and it's unacceptable. And I hope that people end up behind bars.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Senator Sheehy. Hopefully you will come back to Minnesota and bring with some good conservative vibes with you and maybe change things around here. We also heard that you actually have attended American Experiment annual dinners in the past as a high schooler. So we are so excited to have you back this time as a keynote speaker. Thank you for doing that.
It'll be exciting. I only went to one, I think, and it was George H.W. Bush. So it was fun to see that. I think I'm a freshman or something in high school. I went to one. It was a high school group went to watch it. So it's pretty cool to see him there. But I look forward to seeing you guys in a few weeks. And let's get Montana back on the. Well, I should say Montana is on the right track. Let's get Minnesota back on the track.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, lady. See ya.
Thank you so much to making it all the way to the end of this week's episode of the American Experiment podcast. If you do want to get tickets for our spring annual dinner gala with U.S. Senator Tim Sheehy, you can go to americanexperiment.org/events.
Thank you guys so much for your feedback. We love reading your comments, unless your name's Dale and you're calling me Screechy, which is true, by the way. Or no, Shrill? Oh, both true. It's okay. I understand. Even so, leave us comments. We appreciate the feedback. Share it with your friends and like and subscribe and give us 5 stars while you're at it if you wouldn't mind.
And to the point of sound quality, we are going to be launching a new studio, a new set very quickly in the next few weeks here, which will include some soundboard upgrades so we can continue to improve the show and give you guys the highest quality content that we are capable of here.
True. I make no promises on like the tone of my voice, though. I mean, I've been shrill now. I'm shrill forever. I mean, what can I say? I don't know that. I'll do my best. I'll do my best for you, Dale. For you.
Stay tuned. Stay safe out there, and we will see you next week.